Greetings in the name of Odu and Oduna Moray. All that is good and great, all that is blessed and beautiful, all that is creative and conscious, and all that is positive and possible. May the warm sun rays greet you each and every morning, and may your day always be full of joy. Hotep, I am a Disillusioned, the host to Mind Vibes. Thoughts from a Curious Mind, a bi-monthly podcast series exploring and examining social phenomenons then and now. Now, in this episode of Mind Vibes, I want to deal with something that I entitled The Disillusioned Revolutionary, the Messiah Complex. But before we go there, hit that like button, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Right? Again, The Disillusioned Revolutionary, the Messiah Complex. Quote unquote, every revolutionary ends up either by becoming an oppressor or a heretic. Albert Camus. Sometime in December, a conversation took place between Cenk of the show TYT, The Young Turks, and Roland Martin's Unfiltered show. With this episode of Unfiltered, Roland Martin was dealing with Cenk Uyger's new book, quote, Justice is Coming, How Progressives Are Going to Take Over America. And there is a title to that. This was a conversation that broached on the real versus the dream. However, it also demonstrated the differences between the passion that may be blinded by its own vision or desire, opposed to the rationality anchored in reality and facts. Now, in the miniseries John Adams in his closing argument states that facts are stubborn things, that the accused should only be judged by the evidence before them. In the discussion, Cenk Uyger was trying to impress on Mr. Martin that his book explores the reality, according to him, that the youth, along with the progressives, are going to usher in America a utopia-like society. As he sees it, the energy lies within the young progressives. However, Roland, like Adams, was dealing with facts that as of yet, this progressive energy that Cenk was illuminating has not borne out in the results or in any results. Although Cenk pointed to some victories, particularly with some congressional seats in Congress, such as with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, yet they have not constituted a real wave of progressives in various office-holding seats or seats of power. The victories we saw in governorships, Senate, and some laws, both in 2022 and 2023, were victories that were born out of reaction to the Supreme Court's blunder by overturning Roe v. Wade. Had that not happened, perhaps these elections' outcomes would have been different. What Mr. Martin was dealing with is the historical and political map of what was and what is. The issue with Mr. Uyger analysis is he, like many of the liberals and progressives, overlooks a few points, which I like to take a stab at. One or two of those points, and they are: 1, white supremacy, and 2, liberal arbitrage, which has always been, quote unquote, the Negro question. And perhaps I will include a third point of interest, and that is what I call conflicting of ideologies. Now let me take the first, white supremacy. One of the elephants in the room with the white youth and the countercultural movements back then was that they didn't understand the power of their own ideology of whiteness. This is a big issue even within the progressive ideals, which is their inability to be able to deal effectively with this whiteness paradigm. That has always been. Throughout the 60s and the 70s, and many of these whites just did not have an understanding of whiteness. That is why you have people like Tim Weiss and Dr. Robert DiAngelo trying to, deal with that very paradigm. Okay? The second point is, particularly with the liberal progressives, and that was and is what to do about the Negro question. There has always been this uneasiness among whites with black America, especially after the civil rights were signed into law. This notion that paternalism should be the way black Americans should be governed. The thought of a containment policy would be sufficient to curb the ambitions of black Americans to be self-sufficient. This was always, again, this was this argument between the South and the North. Because the South understood, the African Americans. They said if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. And that's what we did, And so we still have this problem with even progressives because of the molecule, the molecule of success that we have had. That always is a fear for white America in general. But perhaps the most elusive of these is the third, conflicting ideologies. And by this I mean many of these progressives tend to base their utopic ideas on a socialistic economic paradigm. They tend to look at European countries for their inspiration without recognizing the obvious. A, that the economic social structure of Europe was basically transplanted from America according to one of Michael Moore's films in a section dealing with Roosevelt's New Deal. That's the same way with Heather Cox, I think it's Heather Cox Richardson, in her book, The Democracy Awakening, and in her tour, she talks about how Hitler took his paradigms from America. Right? Here, the progressives like to cite the free health, the free education, and other liberal ideas. However, the reality is that, one, most European countries are homogenous, and two, many of these countries deal with a higher tax bracket, which our capitalistic system does not allow. We just don't, for some reason, we fear paying taxes, and that was Ronnie the boy, Hoofman, Hoofmouth Ronnie the Reagan, who dealt with, government is the problem. We want smaller government and we want less taxes, and you can't get, those kinds of progressive ideology or progressive things if you don't have taxes. That's just real. Secondly, if your nation was created by the exploitation of others' resources and labor, you cannot undo so easily what has been written and unwritten law, which had been the racial animosity against people of color, and in particular, those of us who are black. That's just real, In this discussion with Cenk and Roland, it appeared to me that Cenk's passion was bordering on disillusional arguments, again, seemingly avoiding the elephant in the room. Although statistics do have its place to bolster one's argument, however, one cannot always rely on numbers, especially when you are dealing with the elephant. which is white supremacy. Now, for whatever reason, Cenk has a deep-seated animosity toward President Biden, much like Cousin Pharaoh of Ring of Fire has a deep-seated animosity towards Vice President Harris. However, I wonder if there is not a racial and gender bias not only with these two, but with the rest of the so-called liberal and progressive. Because again, they keep complaining and dealing with Biden's age and Vice President Harris ain't doing anything, and it's like you really wonder, and of all the success that Biden has done and accomplishment, you're still getting this idea that he's too old and he ain't done nothing, and it flies in the face of facts and reality. So something else is driving their particular animosity towards President Biden. And my thing is that it is a gender and racial thing. Now, I will be the first to claim that Roland Martin doesn't know everything nor that he is always right. But as Roland states, if you're going to come on his show, have some facts or present a credible argument when you are discussing your point of view. And here is an area where I disagree with Roland on, and that is with his lamentation over the drop of the black voters in Wisconsin. His contention was how the Democratic Party did not apply whatever assistance that was needed in the black community. However, my thoughts is, if you know who the enemy is, whether you get whatever assistance you needed, if it is not forthcoming, then you can mount a response all your own. And why do I know that you can do it? Because you have demonstrated that you can do it. Right? This is a thing, that there was this laziness or the apathy of the blacks in Wisconsin and in Milwaukee and all that places. Not to sit down there and put the black brother that was the lieutenant governor into the Senate. With this conversation with Cenk, I, however, will defer to Roland's analysis, since Roland dealt in evidence-based paradigm rather than a fire-breathing passion that so many progressives do, sounding like the crusades of the MAGA nutbags. And that's basically what they're sounding like. Therein lies the problem. Passion is good. I wrote about it. It helps you in wartime and it helps you making love. But there is a time when passion must be cool and logic must be available. Right? And there's a time that you need to be strategic, right? And not blunder into these foolish ideas that, I'm going to be a Messiah, because you are not a Messiah. And as Camus says, most revolutionaries, they tend to turn into dictators and or heretics. So one has to be very careful. Cenk has to be very careful when he talks about, I can do it. No. Because it's easy to look at what somebody isn't doing from the outside. It's harder to deal with what is being done when you're inside. It's a lot harder when you're already inside. And that's the same way with, many people are now dealing with how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's selling out. Well, no, fool, you're not in that chamber. You're not in her job. You're not having to deal with other people across the aisle and even people within your own caucus. But you're dealing with, no. Because your behind is outside. You're looking inside somebody's house, but you don't know what they had to do to get that house the way they want it. Right? And this, I fear, is what Cenk is dealing with. Not only him, but the woman that's running, and what's the brother that's running? That's running, and I think JFK Jr. or somebody is running. But that's always the problem. That was the problem with Obama. That's the problem always, even with Clinton. When you're always critiquing and dealing with and attacking the person in the White House, you are not in that Oval Office. Right? So let's chill with and deal with strategic, deal with rationality. You don't have a third party yet, and I could make a whole other podcast about the difference between Europe and America. You don't have it yet, and since you don't have it, it's just like somebody was getting on Angela Davis. Of, okay, why are you going to vote for Hillary Clinton? She said because it'll be easier for us to maneuver than it will be if you put the orange man in. And she was correct, and she was right. So this is my thing to all of you progressives, right? Get your head out of your ass and begin to start to think. And those of you who are college students, do your research and get your act together. Because if you don't, we will not have either a country or a democracy. And that is not going to be good for anybody. Right? Now these little body bank police say, may we all strive to bend the arc of justice towards humanity and believe that peace and love can be achieved. Madasi P.